everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
Fire to destroy all you've done. Fire.
Well done. Dwayne always brings out a good one to introduce our next segment. Yeah, we're talking about StrataLife, our experts on call. We have from Key Pacific Property Management, Drew Grout is here. We just heard the wonderful voice of Gordon Lai from CMW Insurance. And joining us for the first time on the show, Brett Johnson is the president of Community Fire Prevention. That's why we picked the song. So what are the differences between fire service providers and what you do at Community Fire Prevention? Can you explain what fire service provider is?
Yeah, so basically Stratas are required to have their annual fire inspections completed once a year. Now, there's lots of different vendors out there, and I think what we've really tried to do is focus on customer service to the clients. A lot of the complaints early on we heard in the industry were, we have to be home from 8 till 12 to have our in-suite stuff inspected, and I'm losing money, I'm not being able to come to work. So we were one of the first ones to offer free evening and weekend in-suite inspections. So rather than start at 8, we'll come and start in-suites at 5 and go till 8 o'clock at night, so people don't have to take as much time off of work. Having the inspection done obviously beforehand is key for insurance purposes, as well as just making sure that it's going to work in the event of a fire. So we've really focused on trying to put the customer service aspect back into fire prevention and accommodating customers' requests to meet certain time frames or whatever they might have.
We've all done that. We've all sat there waiting for the cable guy for, well, he'll be there between 8 and noon. Great. Yeah. You go out to the corner store to get the milk for 5 minutes, and that's when you miss them, right?
Yeah, no, there's nothing. That's the one thing that we've really put that focus back on is just client safety first and foremost, and then customer service. And that's been part of our success and why we've grown so quickly, I think, is in the strata world. If you want to do business with a residential strata, you're going to have to meet some of their demands. And if you can accommodate it and you do a good job at it, you'll be pretty successful.
I'm sure when the residents, when you show up, they're like, oh, thank goodness. Or they don't. It's so convenient. They don't even think about the option is staying home during the day, right?
Yeah. I think that they definitely appreciate it, and we get good feedback on site when we're there for sure.
Okay, so what do you do as a service? What are you providing the strata?
So we'll go through and we'll inspect the fire alarm. So unfortunately, we're the guys that make the bells and whistles go off. But it's better to know that they're working than not. It's an electronic device. They're not made to last forever. They can fail, and we want to catch that before it happens, obviously. Another thing we do is sprinkler systems. I know we kind of touched on water damage and things like that, but a properly maintained sprinkler system is key. Right now, in the industry, there's major problems with pipes deteriorating on the inside, and they can clog a sprinkler head when it was going to go off. So we're really trying to put the focus back on doing things to code. Just because if their previous service provider said that we didn't have to do it or we've never done it that way doesn't make it right. So by informing, educating the clients and showing them, hey, this is what the code says, this is what you need to do, it takes the questions off of it, and just education is key to us for sure.
Okay, I've got a layperson's question. How do you test a sprinkler head? We're in this room here. There's 1, 2, 3, and so how
we
do
set
you
one off?
Oh, not going to be fun. Then you just want the insurance money over there.
No, they got to pay.
That's true.
They don't want claims.
That's true.
So how do you test the sprinkler head to know? The ultimate test is it going to go off, right?
Yeah. So sprinkler, we're not actually testing a sprinkler head. We test the system for functionality. So
the pressure and all that.
So basically, there's a paddle that will sit in the pipe, and as water is flowing past that point, the paddle engages and would trip a fire alarm system. Now, sprinkler heads do have to be looked at by date. So if they're 50 years old, they have to be either replaced or a sample test done. But we're not actually going around and breaking heads and making sure water's coming out. That's a bit of a misconception. Let's not go there. Don't try that one at home.
Yeah. And for people who are listening that are part of a strata, what are the mistakes that homeowners because we have you here, what are people doing to set these things off inadvertently? Obviously heat is number one because they're heat sensitive. Touching them? Yeah,
you know what, I see it a lot, unfortunately, is we go into a bathroom when we're doing inspections in their suites. We go throughout their entire unit, and you go into the bedroom, you look, and you'll see a coat hanger on a sprinkler head, and they've got clothes hanging from it, and it's just a ticking time bomb. Like this, generally they either have a little glass bulb, or in this case here in the building we've got fusible links, but it doesn't take much pressure to break those, and the water's there instantly. Like it's not like, oh, there's a delay, I can run and shut it off. It's there now. It's dirty, it's black, it's grimy, it stinks. Yeah, I mean it's going to make a huge mess. And I mean, Drew, we were just quickly talking off air before about water damage and how severe it can be. It takes no time at all. You said an incident we crossed was a building in New West.
Yeah. I've had experience with a couple of buildings, but a recent one was a high rise where one sprinkler head, maybe two, went off high up, ran for about 15 minutes, and the claim was in the millions just from water damage.
Yeah, and that's no fire involved whatsoever.
Okay, I got a dumb question because that's my job. When a sprinkler goes off, this building maybe has 100 sprinklers in it, maybe. Yeah. Do all of them go off?
No, not. You're not going to encounter that in a residential setting. That's like a Hollywood kind of question almost. You see that in TV shows all the time, but they're heat sensitive, so they go off in order. They're generally at 155 degrees, and then as the fire would spread, the next head would go off, and the next head, and eventually, if it's doing its job, it's suppressing it and containing it. But no, that particular style of head that you see in Hollywood shows where they're all going off at once, it's called a deluge system. It's a very commercialized special application.
Like a big warehouse or something.
A big warehouse, yeah. You see it.
Now, a south-facing sunroom in the summer heat spell. Have you ever had a hot day set these off, or are they? No. Is the tolerance too high? It's very. I mean, there have been instances where there are malfunctions or defects in products. There's been recalls on sprinkler heads and that has happened, but they don't just generally go off. Right. You hear that from the person, oh, it went off by itself, but there's generally a reason why that happened. Okay.
Yeah.
So why do you need to have it checked every year?
First off, is functionality to make sure it's going to work. It's insurance purposes as well. I mean, if there's ever a claim where the fire alarm didn't function or a sprinkler system didn't function, somebody's going to be held liable for that, or they're going to want to know why it didn't function. So
they say, let's see your reports, right? And there's nothing there? For
sure, yeah. So that's something that obviously you don't want to incur litigation costs undue. So we come in there beforehand. Prevention's key. Inspecting it before something happens and making sure it's going to work is...
The fire department plays a big role in Strata's having to get these things conducted and following up to make sure that...
Well, yeah, I was going to ask about that fire safety plan. So how does that work with the fire department?
Yeah, fire safety plan is a document that's required to be held on site. Basically, a lot of stratas and it will say, oh, this is an expensive, we're never going to use this binder. But there's a lot more to it that goes on behind the scenes. The fire departments all receive copies of this document electronically, and that allows them to pull up floor plans before they arrive on site.
So if there's someone was dispatching, they could be looking it up while they're on their way. And,
crews have access to that on the route. So they get floor plans of the building before they arrive on site. There's critical contact information. If there's any residents that are going to require special information, a lot of that gets entered into a fire safety plan.
So you have somebody that is in a wheelchair accessible unit, stuff like that?
Stuff like that's it goes into those plans as well, yeah.
And you prepare that?
Yeah,
put that package together.
We'll put a whole fire safety plan package together, and then we take care of submitting it to the fire departments. They read it, authorize it. They generally give a letter saying this has been accepted, and then they keep it electronically. And that's one thing where I think a lot of councils don't understand is there is more that goes on behind the scenes to a fire safety plan. A lot of them, Drew kind of made a comment, oh, that's expensive. There is some money obviously involved.
I'm guessing it's initial expense, but updating it, would you update it annually or biannually?
So you have to refer to the document annually and make sure the key contact information changes. I mean, firsthand.
The Strata's got to update it. Names change, people on council change.
And then say, for example, if a Strata changed from another management company to Key Pacific, yes, you would be included.
There'd
that would need to be updated,
information
right?
that needs to be updated.
Right.
Yeah, and just a good review on it. I mean, structurally, residences don't change too often. Stratas don't do major overhauls and add a third wing or something like that too often. But the floor plan and the upkeep of that information, and just as fire panels change, sometimes locations of that information can change too. So when the fire department shows up, they've got a game plan before they arrive. So there is a lot more to fire safety plans than just a red binder sitting in a box.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine with some DIYers doing some repairs in their units that they have moved alarms, disconnected parts of the system that's monitoring the building.
All the time. Like, it's nothing. I mean, it's quite common when we're there doing testing of the bells that all of a sudden a random trouble comes on a bell circuit. And a lot of times people get sick of hearing the testing noise of us ringing the bells, and they disconnect a wire in their unit to make the buzzer stop. But they don't realize they've actually impaired the entire system, and they don't know that they've caused that. And the next thing you're doing is we have to send out notices saying, okay, we have to come back now and do in-suite.
Suite by suite.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, if somebody's done a reno in their kitchen or wherever, and they don't like that alarm there, and they move it, or they cut a wire in it,
or they build a bulkhead and they block a sprinkler head too. That we see that a lot, where people will build a closet, for example, in a unit, not thinking that, hey, that sprinkler head's not protecting the closet area, so it's actually required to have one. So there's just a lot of time. It's not that they maliciously go out and do renovations and don't know. It's just they're unaware, and that's where permitting comes in. Obviously, if there was permits were pulled on that stuff, they would get caught. But a lot of renovations we know get done without permits, and that's when. Yeah.
We find particularly frustrating is when a resident is doing a renovation, they disconnect the device and don't reconnect it. And some of the newer systems are more sophisticated, could probably identify a unit, but many of them, particularly older ones, will say that part of the building, there's something that's there's a fault. And as Brett was saying, you have to now check every suite to find out which one is the problem.
And that's billed back to the strata, right?
Well, that'd be a decision for the council to make. They'll pay Brett to do the work, but the council will determine whether it's something they should hold the owner responsible for, and most of the time they probably would.
Right.
When that happens, the best question to ask before we even go to site is, has anybody recently moved in? Has anybody doing renovations? Because a lot of times when units change hands, people want to paint.
Sure.
And they take this buzzer off the wall not knowing what it is, and that causes the alarm to start beeping. Or they've done a renovation, and sometimes you put a screw through the wall not thinking there's wire behind it, and you can nick wires.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, you're really going down the rabbit hole trying to find that, right?
It's a nightmare. Yeah.
And what about painting sprinkler heads? You get that too.
Oh, yeah. You can't have any paint on the devices, and we're always the bearer of bad news, saying, hey, unfortunately, you've painted your smoke alarm. We have to replace it. And they say, oh, we can wipe it off, but you can't. It's not. Once it's got paint on it, the device has to be replaced, and generally, again, like that's always up to the strata, but generally the resident will get a bill back from the strata saying you're responsible.
We've had painting contractors in doing common area painting, and they forget to cover up some of the detectors.
Yeah,
and they're painting, and there's sanding, and there's particulates in the air, and they trip the alarms and start setting not the water.
Because they think it's smoke, and it's just plaster dust.
Well, some of these items. That's right. They treat the particulates as smoke. It doesn't know. It says something's blocking this. Bang, and sets it off.
Yeah, that happens all the time where you've got a contractor in an area doing work, and unbeknownst to them, they've caused something to happen down the road. So we get that a lot for sure.
Could I ask, maybe you can get some clarity on a wet system versus a dry system in a strata?
Yeah, so we're referring to sprinkler systems there, and a wet sprinkler system basically means that it's in a heated area where there's not potential for freezing, and it means that there's water at the head right then and there. So if that head was to break, it's instantaneous. Now, a dry sprinkler system is generally in parkades for stratas, but it's anywhere where there's a possibility of freezing. So the system's full of air. Eventually enough air pressure will bleed out through the head, and then the a valve will trip, introduce water to the system, and water's generally there within about 60 seconds at the latest.
Oh, I see. So it's wet in the warm section and air in the cold section.
Exactly.
But then the water comes through at above freezing temperature and comes out.
The water will come, there'll be enough air loss, so air will rush out through the head first, and then basically there's a valve that's held back that stops
in the
water.
warm side of the wall, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And then the water rushes into the pipes and then eventually finds that head and then disperses out.
I guess that's the same as having, like on a house, you would have your faucet outside for your garden hose with a valve inside the wall.
Yeah.
Like you get the ones that are the valve is in the warm side, right?
The difference is with the dry system, the pipes are under pressure, air pressure. So there's going to be a compressor. So when something happens to release pressure, like a head being knocked off, it sends water down the system to that location.
And, insurance world, and we're talking about this now, is like this is the time of year where stratas want to get winterizations of their dry sprinkler systems done. That means that we'll go through, it's natural occurrence that water is going to gather in those pipes over the course of the summer just from condensation, right?
Yeah.
And a properly installed system will drain back to what we call low points. So once a year, given right around this time of year, we'll go through to a building and we'll drain all those low points off to make sure that there's not the potential for freezing, because we've had claims in buildings where it wasn't winterized properly by previous vendors, and the systems trip, freeze, burst, pipes burst. It's very expensive. It's the last thing you really want to have to deal with.
All right, that's the voice of Brett Johnson, president of Community Fire Prevention. You're listening to StrataLife, and when we come back, we'll be talking with Drew Grout of Key Pacific Property Management, and then we'll get back to go around the table one more time and talk about a few other things. That's next on CIL 650.
This is Experts on Call on CIL 650.